All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something pretty fundamental to, well, all of our lives, really, the psychology of money. It's so easy to get caught up in the numbers, the budgeting apps, all that stuff. But what's really driving our decisions about money? Well, it often goes way deeper, right down into our emotions and the way we think.
Yeah, it really does. And for everyone listening out there, I think getting a handle on this, that's the real key, right? You can have like the most perfectly crafted financial plan, but if you're not really understanding these like psychological forces that are working on you, inside, you'll probably end up like veering off track.
Totally. This isn't just theory, right? It really affects those everyday choices we make. Spending, saving, investing.
Exactly.
So in this deep dive, we're going to try to pull back the curtain, look at the emotional reasons behind our money habits, like why do we do the things we do? We'll also explore those hidden mental shortcuts, those cognitive biases that can kind of trip us up on our financial journey. And we'll even look at how people who've built, real lasting wealth, how they approach money, often with a totally different mindset.
Yeah.
So our goal here is to give you some real takeaways, insights you can use, and even more importantly, some actual steps you can take to look at your own financial world, well, in a new light.
Okay, so let's jump right in. And maybe a good place to start is with this idea of the emotional side of money. This is something we see all the time. Financial choices that on paper make no sense.
Yeah.
But they're actually driven by really deep-seated emotions.
Absolutely. I mean, think about a time you bought something, totally impulsively, not because you actually needed it, but because of how it made you feel right then in that moment.
Yeah.
And two really powerful emotions when it comes to money are fear and greed.
And it's so interesting how these two super strong emotions can kind of lead us down like different paths, but both can be problematic.
Yeah. Right.
Take fear, for example. It can be really paralyzing when it comes to money. Like, think about during a market downturn.
Oh, yeah.
The fear of losing even more, that can make people sell off their investments like right when prices are low.
Yeah.
The worst time.
Or, on the other hand, someone might be so afraid of risk that they don't invest at all in things that could actually grow a lot in the long run. It's like they're so scared of stumbling that they never even take a step.
Right. It's like reacting to every little sound like it's a bear, when it's probably just the wind.
Exactly.
And then there's greed, kind of the other side of that coin, right?
Yeah.
It's that intense wanting for quick and easy wealth. It pulls people into these like speculative bubbles, chasing the latest hot cryptocurrency or whatever the meme stock is, often without even really understanding like what's driving the value. And history shows us those stories, they don't often end well. Big losses.
And what's interesting, if we zoom out a bit, is that these emotional responses, they usually aren't coming from careful, rational thinking. They're often rooted in our past, particularly our early experiences with money.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah. So this brings us to money trauma and how childhood experiences really impact us.
This is huge, right? Imagine growing up in a household where money was just a constant source of stress.
Yeah.
Versus someone who, grew up with financial stability. It's like they develop these entirely different, operating systems for dealing with money.
That's a great way to put it. Someone who grew up with like financial insecurity, they might develop what's often called a scarcity mindset. So even if their finances get much better later on, there's still this like worry about not having enough.
Right.
They might be overly cautious, hoard resources, have a hard time investing, all stemming from this, deep-seated fear of lacking.
And on a flip side, someone who grew up with more security, they might develop what's called an abundance mindset, right? This belief that there are always enough resources and opportunities, which sounds great, but without awareness, it could maybe lead to overconfidence.
Yeah, or like a lack of appreciation for the effort it actually takes to build and keep wealth.
It's fascinating how these early money stories, they really stick with us and shape our attitudes like our whole lives.
It really does.
So how do these ingrained mindsets translate into our actual behavior with money day to day? I think one really common thing is this instant gratification trap.
Oh, yeah, the pull of that add to cart button.
It's irresistible.
We've all been there.
It's so interesting how powerful that urge is to buy something right now compared to saving and investing, where the rewards are often, way off in the future and less tangible.
Yeah, it's like our brains are wired for the now, but building wealth is a long game.
And what's even more interesting is how our environment, like right now, it's like designed to feed this. Social media is constantly showing us these perfect lifestyles, these products we need.
Yeah.
And it creates this feeling of like wanting and FOMO, fear of missing out. And advertising, they've gotten so good at tapping into our desires for instant pleasure. And then there's all these like buy now, pay later services.
Yeah.
It just makes it so easy to buy stuff, even if it means going into debt later.
Yeah.
It's like they're just removing all the speed bumps on the road to spending.
It's true.
So I know you mentioned a technique earlier, the 24-hour rule. Can you talk about that? How can our listeners use that?
Absolutely. So the 24-hour rule, or you could even extend it to like 48 or 72 hours. It's a really simple but effective strategy for, not buying things impulsively. So when you see something non-essential, right, and you just have to have it right now, especially if it's a big purchase, you just commit to waiting, that set amount of time. Mm-hmm. And that waiting period gives you space to think about it objectively, right? Yeah. Is it a real need or just an emotional whim? And often that initial intense urge, it fades.
Yeah.
And you realize, hey, I don't actually need this thing. So you save money and you might even prevent some buyer's remorse.
Right. It's like hitting the pause button on your spending impulses.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, so we've looked at how emotions play a big role. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about how our brains themselves, they can sometimes lead us astray when it comes to money. We're talking about those sneaky cognitive biases.
Yeah, these are basically like mental shortcuts or patterns in our thinking that while they can be helpful in, everyday life, they can also lead to errors in judgment, especially with money.
Yeah.
And recognizing them, that's the first step to minimizing their impact.
So let's dive into a few of the more common ones.
Yep.
You mentioned loss aversion bias earlier. What exactly is that, and how does it affect our choices about money?
So loss aversion is this well-known psychological thing where the pain we feel from losing money is way stronger than the happiness we get from gaining the same amount. Like the disappointment of an investment going down might be much bigger than the joy you felt when it went up by the same amount. And this can make us do some pretty irrational things, like holding on to investments that are doing poorly way longer than we should just because we don't want to admit the loss.
It's like the fear of being wrong is stronger than the potential for future gains, right?
Exactly. It's like we're so scared of admitting a mistake that we end up like making it worse by not doing anything.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the Diderot effect?
Okay, so the Diderot effect, also sometimes called lifestyle creep, is this interesting phenomenon where, you get one nice new thing and suddenly it sets off this chain reaction of other purchases.
Oh, yeah.
Because you want to keep everything like consistent and harmonious,
Right,
Like
yeah.
a classic example is you buy a fancy new coffee machine.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden you feel like you need more expensive coffee beans, maybe some special mugs, even a nicer scale for weighing the beans.
Oh, yeah, totally.
One purchase pushes up your overall spending to match the level of that new thing, like one domino falling and knocking over a whole bunch of others.
It's like everything you own suddenly feels inadequate, compared to the new, nicer thing.
Exactly.
Okay, next up we have the endowment effect. What's that all about?
So the endowment effect is basically we tend to overvalue things just because we own them. Mm-hmm. We get attached, we feel ownership, and this can really distort how we see their actual market value. So with money, this might look like not wanting to sell a stock that's doing bad just because you've had it for a long time and you're kind of attached.
Right.
Or holding on to property that's not a good investment anymore for sentimental reasons or because you think it's worth more than it is.
Yeah.
It stops us from making smart decisions about selling things that aren't benefiting us.
It's like that old T-shirt you never wear, but you can't throw it away.
Right.
But with, way bigger financial consequences.
Exactly.
Okay, and last but not least, you mentioned confirmation bias. How does that play into our money mistakes?
So confirmation bias is this human thing where we look for information that confirms what we already believe, and we ignore stuff that contradicts us. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to investing, this can be really dangerous.
Yeah.
For example, let's say you're convinced a certain stock is going to do amazing. You might only read articles or listen to analysts who agree with you and totally ignore anything that suggests there might be problems. This can lead to being overconfident in your investments and not seeing risks.
It's like building your own little echo chamber, right? It's just hearing what you want to hear. But at least being aware of these biases, it gives us a chance to question our own thinking, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've looked at the emotional factors, the cognitive traps. Now, let's talk about how people who've actually built and maintained wealth, how they think about money differently. What are some of the key differences in their mindset?
One of the biggest differences is wealthy individuals often see money as a tool, not the end goal itself.
Interesting.
It's subtle, but it's a really important shift.
Right. For many, money is the goal, right? Like, it'll bring happiness, security.
Yeah.
But for the wealthy, it sounds like it's more of a means to an end.
Exactly. They're focused on using money for investment, long-term growth, not just spending it right away. They prioritize building assets, things that will make more money over time.
Right.
Like stocks, real estate, owning businesses. Instead of relying only on their job income, this lets their wealth compound and grow much more effectively over time.
It's like planting seeds that keep bearing fruit, right?
Exactly.
It makes sense. It's about making your money work for you, rather than you always working for your money. You also mentioned the wealthy place a higher value on time than money. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. They understand that time is limited, you can't get it back. So they often use their money to free up their time. This might mean outsourcing tasks they don't like or aren't good at, automating things in their businesses or personal lives, or creating passive income streams.
Right.
So they're earning money without directly trading their time for it. Things like hiring a virtual assistant for admin stuff or investing in systems that streamline business operations.
So it's about maximizing their most valuable asset, their time, by using money strategically.
Exactly.
That's a cool way to look at it. Okay, last point you brought up was about risk. You said the wealthy approach risk differently.
It's a common misconception that wealthy people are all super risk averse. Actually, they often engage in what you might call calculated risk-taking. The key is calculated. They don't just gamble blindly.
Right.
They do their research, they carefully analyze potential downsides, and they use strategies like diversification, spreading their investments across different types of assets. Things like investing in a mix of stocks and bonds, or starting a business after really doing their homework.
Right.
They understand that some risk is usually necessary for big growth, but you got to be smart about it.
So it's about being informed and strategic about risk, not just avoiding it entirely. That's an important distinction. All right, so we explored this from a bunch of angles. Now, for the most important part for our listeners, what are some concrete steps they can take to start rewiring their own money mindset?
Right. So how do we move from just understanding this stuff to actually changing our lives? A great place to start is by working on how you think about money at a fundamental level.
Okay, what does that actually look like? How can someone shift those deeply ingrained thoughts?
It starts with noticing the things you say to yourself about money. Like you'll often find yourself saying, I can't afford that. Try to swap that out for a question that opens up possibilities. Like, how can I afford that?
Well, I like that.
It sounds simple, but that little language shift can get you thinking creatively about solutions. Also, try to change how you see money in general. Instead of it being a source of stress, see it as a tool, a resource that can help you reach your goals, have more freedom, build security.
It's a subtle but powerful shift, yeah. What's another practical strategy?
Tracking your spending and reflecting on it regularly, that's essential.
Okay.
A lot of people are shocked when they actually see where their money's going.
Yeah.
Even keeping a money journal for a month, that can give you so much insight into patterns and triggers for emotional spending. There are also lots of budgeting apps that can do this automatically, giving you a clear picture of your finances. That awareness is the first step to making more conscious choices.
Right. So shining a light on those habits, understanding the why behind them.
Exactly.
You also mentioned training ourselves to delay gratification, which is so tough. How can we get better at that?
Well, we talked about the 30-day rule, which is great for big non-essential purchases.
Yeah.
By waiting, you have time to cool off emotionally and really decide if you need that thing. Another powerful principle is paying yourself first. This means putting money into savings and investments right away before you spend on anything else.
Right.
It flips the script, right?
Yeah.
Instead of saving what's left over, which is often nothing, saving becomes the priority.
I love that. Making saving the default, not an afterthought.
Exactly.
And finally, you mentioned the importance of surrounding yourself with people who are good with money. How can that make a difference?
The people we hang out with, they influence us a lot, our beliefs, attitudes, and even our financial habits.
Right.
So connecting with people who have good money habits, similar goals as you, who are positive about managing their money, they can be so motivating. They can give you insights, tips, and support. Also, seeking out educational resources like books, podcasts, online content about smart money management.
Right.
That can really help you learn and become more confident with your own finances.
So it's about building a supportive network and committing to learning more about money.
Exactly.
All of these are things our listeners can start doing today.
Absolutely. And remember, this is a journey, you know? It's ongoing. You'll keep learning and refining things.
Right.
There'll be ups and downs. But the more you understand your own psychology around money and use these strategies, the better you'll be at making good financial decisions. And ultimately, building lasting well-being.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we've really highlighted how much our emotions and those subtle cognitive biases, how they affect our decisions about money. We've also looked at how a different mindset, seeing money as a tool, valuing time, and being smart about risk, that's often what sets apart people who've achieved lasting financial success.
Yeah.
And most importantly, we've given you some practical strategies you can start using today.
Right now.
To start rewiring your money mindset, from changing your core beliefs to tracking your spending to delaying gratification.
And the big takeaway here is your financial future isn't just about how much you earn. It's about how you think about money on a deeper level. That inner game is just as critical, maybe even more so, than the practical stuff like budgeting and investing.
Totally. So we encourage you, take some time to reflect on your own money mindset, your habits. This is a journey of self-discovery, and every step you take towards understanding your financial psychology, it can lead to big, lasting improvements in your overall well-being and security. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you some things to think about and some tools to navigate your financial journey with more awareness, intention, and success.